The Motorola G line of phones has been haunting us since 2013. If you've scrolled through the list of devices for sale on the website of almost any prepaid carrier at any time in the past 10 years, I can guarantee you've seen a Moto G device in one of its many variations, boasting a tempting price tag, if not being offered for free. But for anyone who has owned a Moto G device, you will know these things are not often worth it, even if you can snag one for free. That is until this year when Motorola launched the Moto G Play 2024. The G line of phones is already bad enough, but the G Play variant is one of the lowest tier devices Motorola currently offers. So imagine my surprise when I see so many people praising this phone for what it brings to the table at such a low cost. With the disaster that was the Moto G Play in 2023, this seemed too good to be true. So I bought one myself to find out once and for all, is this thing being overhyped or does it deserve the praise? Let's get this box open and find out. First thing you'll definitely notice is the eye-catching sapphire blue color that makes the G Play almost look premium. Pick up the phone though and there will be no doubt in your mind, this thing is plastic. It is so lightweight it rivals some of the cheapest smartphones out there, not trying even for a moment to hide its ultra low budget price point. But for most normal people out there, this is not going to be something you're likely to notice, and in fact, some may appreciate its lightweight design for ease of handling. After all, this phone isn't exactly small, being almost the same size as my Google Pixel 8 Pro. Screen size also comes in at a respectable 6.5 inches, also close in size to the Pixel 8 Pro. Speaking of that display, there's some good and bad to be said about it. First, yes, there's a giant chin, which is made all the more obvious due to an unimpressive LCD display that doesn't get very bright and definitely has some viewing angle quirks. That being said, this display is also one of the best things about the phone for one reason: refresh rate. Instead of the 60Hz display on many other budget devices, this phone uses a 90Hz display, meaning animations and touch responsiveness are smoother and overall better. It's hard to explain and I can't really show it on camera, so you'll just have to take my word for it when I say this one thing, that high refresh rate, makes this phone feel incredible. I'm speaking comparatively of course, but next to 2023's G Play, this phone feels like it's not even competing in the same space. And get this, right now the Moto G Play 2023 and 2024 are basically priced the same for most carriers. So if you're comparing the two right now, wondering which you should get, you don't even need to watch the rest of this video or do any more research. I'll say it in as few words as I can. This is one of the worst phones you can buy, and this is quite a bit better. And by better, I'm mainly talking performance. I've already talked about the 90Hz display, but that can only take the phone so far. The 2024 G Play has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 665 and 4GB of RAM. While this phone's not going to win any awards in the benchmarks, it performs respectably on everyday activities like GPS navigation, watching videos, some light gaming. This phone does it. Now, there are hiccups of course, and there will be some delay in just about anything you do compared to a flagship smartphone, but it doesn't feel super slow and it tackled most multitasking without major issue. One cool little feature that's not exactly unique to this phone, but cool nonetheless, is the little message that pops up when you clear out all open apps, showing how much memory has been cleared from the RAM. I'm not exactly sure how this is useful, but I do like to see it. Another thing that this phone has that's worth mentioning is RAM Boost, which uses some of the phone's internal storage to extend the amount of available RAM. While this phone only has 4GB of RAM by default, with RAM Boost it gets an extra 2GB, adding up to a total of 6. This trick has been used for many years in both computers and mobile devices, but for the most part is actually pretty useless, and I really didn't notice a difference with it on or off. Speaking of internal memory though, we've got a pretty average 64GB of built-in memory, which is essentially the bare minimum for a 2024 smartphone. What makes this phone stand out from the crowd, however, is that storage can be expanded via a microSD card by up to 1TB. I really wish other smartphone manufacturers would take a hint and bring expandable storage back, but that's not likely to happen, and hey, we're talking about a 2024 smartphone with expandable storage. I think Motorola deserves some praise for that. Of course, we've also got the usual Motorola standard features like the double chop flashlight and 3-finger screenshot. Of course, this being an ultra budget device, you also get plenty of pre-installed stuff you don't want, but most of those can be uninstalled. Aside from the bloat, the software experience here is overall pretty clean and not a whole lot to complain about. As far as Android updates go, I'm not really sure how long this phone is going to be supported, and it will vary by carrier, but my AT&T model is currently running Android 14. During the 2 months I was using it, I received several updates, so it looks like, for now at least, Motorola is keeping it it regularly up to date. Battery life is often a concern with budget devices, but here that doesn't seem to be much of an issue. Since I don't use AT&T, I couldn't do a lot of real-world testing with mobile data or cell usage, but from what I've seen, it has no problem getting through a whole day, even with the 90Hz refresh rate enabled. Alright, let's talk audio. Usually when I buy a new phone, audio and speaker quality are not the first things on my mind when I'm testing it out for the first time. The G Play, however, has a couple things that make it more unique. First, of course, is the 3.5mm headphone jack, which, depending on who you are, could be a selling point or you might not care at all. Second thing that caught my attention is this Dolby Atmos thing, which is supposed to deliver a premium listening experience through the phone's loudspeaker and connected devices. Lastly, they talk quite a bit about those stereo built-in speakers, so I had to give that a test as well. The good news is, the speakers in this thing are great. I mean, I'm not picky and you can spend $1,000 more to get a phone with better speakers, but I think these are so good, no one is really going to notice any difference without a side-by-side comparison. They get plenty loud and are clear enough for pretty much any type of media you'd want to play through this phone. It is pretty easily blocked if you're not careful, but that's mostly true of any smartphone. Unfortunately, there's nothing to praise when it comes to audio through any other source. Either through the headphone jack or through Bluetooth, audio quality was very disappointing when compared to any other device. Fortunately though, no normal person is going to notice this without a side-by-side comparison. I really only mention this because Motorola tries to sell this Dolby Atmos thing as an audio quality enhancing feature, when all it really does is slightly boost the volume. I can pretty much guarantee nobody cares. I just want to call this out as a gimmick that no one should take seriously. The disappointments and gimmicky features only get worse from there though. Flip the phone around and meet the undisputed worst part of this phone, the camera. And yes, aside from the front camera, there is just one camera on the back of this phone, which doesn't seem like enough in 2024, but at least it's a 50 megapixel sensor though, right? I mean, that's the exact same size as the main sensor on my Pixel 8 Pro, so this should be a pretty good camera. Except it's not. While megapixel count absolutely does have an impact on photo quality in a very general sense, in this particular case, 50 megapixels means absolutely nothing beyond marketing. Against even the 12 megapixel camera on my 4-year-old iPhone 12 mini, the G Play's camera doesn't stand a chance. And yes, the iPhone's got less than 1/4 of the Moto's megapixels. The photos from this phone are very noisy, and in low light any amount of motion increases blur dramatically, and autofocus begins to struggle. Maybe you could get away with photos like this in 2015, but not now. The only thing that Motorola has done to try to mask this subpar photo quality is this aggressive HDR effect that boosts contrast and saturation to an unnatural level. But don't let those neon green trees distract you from the soft noisiness in the photos. Unfortunately, video quality is even on another level of bad. It's almost like what you'd get out of a 2012 era smartphone. The only thing I can commend about these videos is that unlike the photos, there are no pretentious claims of 4K or even high quality video. It's just a video recording mode that exists if you need it. But this camera, it's just a deal breaker for me. And not just for me, I wouldn't buy this phone for anyone I care about if there's even a remote chance they're going to use the camera at all. I'm sure some people will try to argue that not everyone wants or needs a great phone camera, and to that I absolutely agree. However, I believe this camera almost falls into the unusable category. The only way you can get anything passable out of this camera is if you have an extremely steady hand, are able to get close to your subject, and most importantly, lighting has to be perfect. Ideally some natural light, but not too much. If you're buying this phone and you'll never touch the camera, I'll give it a pass. Just don't be expecting too much from this pretentious 50 megapixel camera. Well, I'm glad that's over. I really didn't want to dog on the camera like that because when you're not using the camera, this is overall a good phone. Visually, it's not ugly. I'm not a huge fan of the camera bump, to be honest. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder and all that. Of course, there are some things I really like about this phone. That side-mounted fingerprint scanner power button is great. Those built-in stereo speakers are surprisingly solid, and the phone doesn't freeze and crash every 5 seconds, which you'd think would be a given, but in the world of budget smartphones, even the most basic functionality is sometimes just too much to ask. But this phone, the Moto G Play 2024, which can be purchased for as little as $50 US, is finally better than I ever thought I would see from a G Play device. If you're on an extreme budget and you can find this phone for less than $100, I say go for it. Just don't have your expectations too high and don't ever touch that camera. That's gonna wrap it up for this video. If you have experience with this phone or have an opinion you want to make known, feel free to drop it in the comments below. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.